right, over to you.
Hi, well, first of all, thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Secondly, wow, Sound of Violence is a fantastic film. I'd just like to just say that before we begin. It's here in the UK now. So, I hope there's a wider audience for it than just FrightFest, which you showed at the Surface a couple of weeks ago. But you just want to talk a bit about the film and just give your view on that.
I mean, first, it was very important for me to have it released in the UK in the best way possible. And FrightFest was a good way. And then Dazzler took it on to make sure that it was available immediately after. So that was cool because everything I did started in the UK. So that meant a lot. But yeah, going back to your question about the film, what do you want to know?
So
where it started?
Like you say, where did it all begin? Where did the ideas come from?
It started because I produced a documentary called 808 about the TR-808 drum machine. And essentially between very late 2011 and the end of 2016 when it was released, essentially that film kind of took over my life. And it's the reason I also moved from the UK to the US. It's the reason for many, many things. And for all this time, I was very much drum machine obsessed. So, but then it also got me exhausted as far as my documentary career. And this is when my wife kind of suggested that I should switch into the genre that I loved all my life, which is horror. And I was developing a few things, and then suddenly I had a light bulb moment that I should kill somebody with the drum machine. And that's where the short film Conductor was born. And the short film Conductor was supposed to be just that, because I was developing another feature, but very quickly the feedback was such that I knew that the character of Alexis needed to be expanded upon. I mean, I had a lot of things written about her as far as her backstory and stuff, because obviously that helps when we're directing actors. But yeah, I dove headfirst and I wrote the script, and it kind of really grew organically and very quickly. I wrote the first script of Conductor's feature adaptation in January 2019, and we shot it in November or October, November 2019. So that's really quick. But I guess that's when you have an idea that seems to have legs, it kind of catches on. And but we knew that we couldn't call it Conductor because it worked really well for the short, but that was not the right title. And then I was reminiscing about house music, and I remember Cassia's Sound of Violence, and I was like, yep, Sound of Violence.
That brings me on to my next question, which, where did the title come from? But it just answers that perfectly. And actually,
it's not because of Sound of Metal. Everybody's like, oh yeah, you just decided to latch on this. No, I had no idea about Sound of Metal when we renamed the movie, and that was a happy coincidence in many ways, because when I did watch Sound of Metal, it just kind of validated things that we had done, because we shot at the same time, from what I understand. They were shooting in 2019 as well, and it came out in 2020. We could have come out in 2020, but we took our time, and with the pandemic we had some delay, so we kept going. But as far as the title, no, it's as much as I adore Sound of Metal, it's the title has nothing to do with it.
Yeah, they're completely different films anyway. I mean, it's very hard to get lost between the two. So you just mentioned, obviously, Alexis's story there. Fantastically played by Jasmine Savoy Brown. I mean, how did you cast somebody so perfect in a role?
The genius of my casting director, Amy Renee. That's the short and sweet answer. I mean, she suggested Jasmine, and I knew Jasmine, not personally. I knew of Jasmine because of The Leftovers, a show that I was a really big fan of. I was, this show, it's either people were really, really into it, or people had no idea what it was. But I was amongst it. Yeah, I was crazy about that show, and was very happy about that it was contained to 3 seasons, and we were left wanting more and such. But Jasmine really stood out when she appeared in the 2nd season, and it's like I remembered her. So when Amy mentioned her, I thought that was a brilliant idea. And we quickly arranged a meeting. Also, let's not forget that I'm writing the story of a queer Black woman, and Jasmine being a queer Black woman and also an activist in those domains to make sure that representation is right. I felt that this was going to guarantee that not only the story is told right, but also that she, I wrote the script with a certain open mind, and then I was hoping to get an actor to really collaborate and come and meet me halfway to bring this character to life that I'm not going to project or assume the traits of. So I was so lucky to then get to work with Jasmine. And when the first time I met her, conversation and her thoughts on the script and the fact that she was happy that none of it was cliche, which was obviously good to hear. It was also her passion for the role, and I felt I had met Alexis, and so I'm so lucky that Jasmine is my lead. And now she's going to be in the new Scream, and she has a TV show called a new TV show called Yellow Jackets coming to Showtime. And I probably wouldn't be able to get her if I'd started this movie today.
No, it certainly seems like a stroke of genius. But to be fair, she really does carry the film. I know Lily Simmons as well alongside her. It's really kind of that central core. But yeah, it seems like a very contained film. As you see a lot of horror films that really just kind of go out and out and out. But it feels like a bit of a triangle in terms of the scale starts big and it really becomes centralized to Alexis's kind of end of story arc, really. I love that writing in it. And I suppose, putting Alexis's story aside, the other big star is the music. And I know you mentioned earlier, obviously you've come from a background of music, the documentary you did on the drum kits. How was it, blending that element of horror with the, making sure the music was right as well?
Well, this is where the benefit of making the short was really felt. Making the music a protagonist really in the story, because we say very early on in the movie, music is a language. Beats are a language, and so we wanted to feel that the music was part of the dialogue. And this, this is part of my luck. I've been surrounded by people who are either musicians or music inclined in a way that they really wanted this experiment to work. We know that music in horror is obviously it's a key ingredient. You look at Carpenter's work, or it's just like there's always this sort of weight of what the music needs to bring in terms of mood and telling you where you are in the story. But I wanted to deepen that and bring the story and really get the audience and the character to hear the same things as much as possible, because the music was at the core of everything that was happening in the movie. And so, I frankly didn't realize how much of a challenge it would be, because I thought, like, come on, music as a character, it's been done, surely. But we had to create something really mixing between score and the title track is really a subtle. It's really a game of details, and luckily was not only the composers, Jaakko Männinen, who also composed the music for the short, but then we brought on Alexander Berg, who's an instrumentalist and understood all those crazy instruments I picked for as weapons, and then Omar Al-Deeb, who's a score composer. And so the three of them really collaborated to kind of string up this interweaved kind of audio journey. And then the genius of Jussi Tekelman, Jussi Tegelman works a lot with Sam Raimi, so he knows horror, but he's also a musician, so he knows music, and he also worked with us on the short. We were really lucky because we're fellow Finns and we stick together. But really, but my producer Hannu Auke is also a musician. But then as well, take it all the way to Jasmine is a singer songwriter, a musician, and with a music. It took everybody's affinity with music to get it right, because it needed to be felt in the performance, it needed to be felt in the composition, it needed to be in this sort of multi-sensorial journey that when it gets hard to watch and somebody might decide to close their eyes, I'm going to get them with the music. And that's how they're part of the story.
How do you follow that? That is super. that is, it's fantastic. And absolutely, the music is as much key as much as everything else. I mean, we've kind of talked a lot about the music and the actual horror element, and come back into that. How did you come up with those ingenious designs? That I would say they'd even rival the likes of Saw, in terms of the elements and the tools that are used, to bring death, and on the other hand, also bring the music and the heart that Alexis, Jasmine's character Alexis, brings to the film. How did you, what was the thought process behind the killing machines, I call them?
It's, I'm a normal guy. No, it was fun because, like, I mean, obviously when I had the light bulb of killing somebody with a drum machine, it's an instrument I knew very well, dealing with the 808. So although we used a different type of drum machine than short, but the idea of beats being violent is kind of logical. But when we were expanding, and I'm like, well, I'm not going to make beats all the way through the film. It needs to have other instrumentation. So I started to kind of play around with types of instruments that I felt had core functions that could expand into something a little bit more gruesome. And I get a lot the comparison with Saw, but at the same time, I'm like, well, it's mine a very human scale because they're instruments. They're rigged instruments, and we're using the core functions of what they do in kind of, the worst possible outcome. So that was the important part, and I made a list of ideas of type of instruments and to contraption kind of thing, and it was funny to how many didn't make the movie because many of them were kind of too big. Like there's one especially that I absolutely adored, but that was way too big, way too big, and it would completely imbalance the film because then that would be like Jigsaw style. Big installation that are like, he has buildings, that are traps kind of thing. Here we're just trying to make, okay, she rigged an instrument. That's what it is, right? And it's just a basic hydraulics. It's nothing that is just, so yeah, so I tried to think crazy. I also tried to think about the sounds I wanted to have in the music. And this is where, I have to say that the idea that there's a theremin in my story is still something that I'm extremely proud of, even though it's not an instrument that many people always think of. It's a very important instrument, especially in the horror genre. So, yeah, it took research, it took experimentation, and it took. I had a lot of fun, I must admit.
Certainly comes across. So you mentioned there, obviously, there's ideas, there's still elements of Alexis's story that perhaps could evolve. What is the plan for the future? Is this a standalone story, or is there a second album coming from Alexis?
Only the future will tell. It's not completely in my hands, but I'd love to expand on the universe. Yeah.
That's good. We certainly would look forward to it. The ending is certainly open to adventure, even though the film itself does kind of go full circle, which is great for a film not to leave too many loose ends, to say the least. And open.
But the ending, and no spoilers on that, is also open to interpretation because actually there's a lot of things that seem to happen and a lot of things that may not. So it's like it's an interesting. And this is why the ending enrages as well a few people. It's actually, this is a divisive movie in many ways. So it's just like that ending, which is it's a statement ending, but it's just like some people got really mad at me for it. Some people got really into it, and some people got very mad at me for it. And I actually love that because the worst thing would be that they would be like, okay, that was fine.
Absolutely, and that's why we love the horror genre so much. It's one of the few genres that play with endings, so ambiguous like that. And
this is why I love the UK, because the reactions I got out of the UK were just, we came out of South by, virtual South by namely, but we got really it's interesting, although you're interacting in, virtually, so it's not fully telling as far as what to expect reaction wise. But there in the UK, being in person, being, I was sat in the room, and I could hear the gasps and the laughter and the blah blah blah. I also saw a few people walk out, and I was watching them, and I was like, wait, and then I was like, actually, fair enough. It was right after it was after the first murder. I was like, oh, did I go too far? It was kind of like both a celebration and thing, but we had crazy the response at FrightFest. I mean, you said you saw it there, so I got a Q&A afterwards, and I was very emotional because it was not only just seeing it on the IMAX screen, which is crazy enough, but just an amazing reaction. Applause is not expected, and yeah, fun.
Yeah, it's certainly one of our highlights for the festival. I can honestly say it's actually really entertaining, and more importantly, original horror film. Yeah, you obviously bring a lot to that in terms of the music element of it from your history there, but obviously, there is still a voice there for the horror genre, which they blend so well. You've got the soul within the music, but you've also got the reason, and the way of getting that is somehow more violent than what we do. Normal people would expect. Thank you very much, Alex. There's nothing else I wanted to add on that. So thank you very much for taking the call to speak to us today. And we certainly hope to speak to you again in the near future, even if it's with Alexis's story or whether it's with another one.
And thank you again for those very cool tweets and messages. It's much appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely, it's our pleasure. Thank you.
Great talking to you.